Well, so I'm Andrew Spainhauer, and I appreciate you taking some time to chat with me a little bit on camera today, Jantz. Here with Jantz Johnson, I want to give I know this isn't a normal part of your day-to-day life being an attorney, but I want to give our clients a chance to get to know our attorneys a little bit, so I appreciate you humoring me. Let's start at the top. I want to learn about you. Tell me about your childhood, where'd you grow up?
So I was born in California, Southern California. Specifically Upland, which is in San Bernardino County. My dad had a podiatry practice down there. For the first part of my life, I grew up in Southern California, and I don't have a ton of memories about it, but
Till you were how old?
Until I was probably about 3 or 4.
Okay.
And then, my dad's practice, he closed his practice in Southern California, and we actually moved up to Idaho. That's where my dad's family is from. They have a family farm up there.
Okay.
So we moved up there. He started teaching at Rick's College at the time, now BYU, Idaho. So he was a anatomy professor for, probably 5 or 6 years.
Okay.
So
he left having his podiatry practice and went and started teaching anatomy at BYU, Idaho.
Yeah. Yeah, he still had his podiatry license, but he had this opportunity to be a teacher, a professor, and he wanted to do that.
Cool.
So I lived in Idaho probably for 5 or 6 years, and then we moved again. And there's a whole history of moving. I think I've moved probably 15, 20 times in my growing up years.
Me too.
We moved from Idaho to South Dakota when I was about 8 or 9, I believe.
Okay.
And then lived in South Dakota for ever.
Okay.
So
all the way till graduating high school?
Graduating high school, a little bit past that. And then, I got into BYU, Idaho.
Okay.
Shortly after graduating high school, which was in, I think, 2008.
So tell me so you went through all your teenage years in South Dakota. What is in South Dakota? What did you do?
A lot of hunting, a lot of fishing, just, bonfires out in the woods.
Okay. So you're one of those guys.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So I grew up kind of in a small town. It was a town of about 25,000 people.
Okay.
Watertown, South Dakota. So my dad had a podiatry practice out there at one of the clinics there. And, not a whole lot to do because we were in this kind of bigger town, I should say, for South Dakota.
Yeah.
But it was smack dab in the middle of all this farmland.
Okay.
So, just me and my friends would just drive around out on the country roads.
Did you guys have a farm, live on a farm out there, or no, that was just Idaho?
Yeah, no, that was just in Idaho. But when we moved to South Dakota, we were right in town, just, down the street from the high school, down the street from the clinic that my dad worked at. Yeah. And, I had my siblings go to the high school there, my younger brother. And so we just kind of grew up there, but Sweet. Growing up in South Dakota, you can imagine that it was just kind of centered around hunting, fishing, kind of doing the rural lifestyle.
Yeah.
But I was kind of a city boy in country farmland. So
from big city Rexburg.
Big city Rexburg, yeah. No, just we just never did the farming thing,
Gotcha.
So it's what does a city boy do in farmland besides get in some trouble? So
yeah. Okay.
But I did grow up hunting and fishing and killed a lot of pheasants in my day.
And how many siblings do you have?
So I have 3 siblings. I have 2 older siblings, an older sister, and an older brother.
Okay.
And there's a 7-year gap between me and my older brother. And then I have a younger brother who's 3 years younger than I am.
Okay. How would your parents describe you as a kid? What would they say about you?
Just a crazy kid,
Yeah.
jungle child.
Okay.
I call my daughter Mowgli because she's got crazy hair and she's, a little bit all over the place and climbing on everything. And that was very similar to how I was.
Okay.
And my mom cursed me with, I hope you have 3 kids exactly the same as you were.
The mother's curse.
Yeah, the mother's curse. Because there's home videos of me, running around in just, diapers and with swords stuck in my...
Yeah.
I had swords stuck in my diapers and just running around like a crazy kid with
Sweet.
chocolate all over my face. That's the kind of kid I was growing
Well, that
up.
sounds like a fun childhood for sure. So you graduate high school in South Dakota, and you end up going off to college back in Rexburg, going to BYU, Idaho.
Yeah. Long story short, things didn't work out at BYU, Idaho.
Okay.
And probably won't go into that. But
Okay. Sore subject, I guess.
it is like
Okay.
I'm I grew up LDS. I'm still active in the church, but yeah, things didn't work out at BYU, Idaho. So then I moved down to Utah.
Okay.
And lived with my grandparents in Utah County in Springville, and got enrolled in UVU.
Okay.
And yeah, that's where I graduated with my undergrad, was from Utah Valley University.
Very cool. Okay. So what did you get your undergrad in?
Criminal justice and law enforcement.
Really? Okay. Criminal justice and law enforcement. And was the plan to always parlay that into end up going to law school, or was there other plans?
No, interestingly, I wanted to be a police officer. That was
Okay.
every intention. All my goals were set to, going to police officer, academy, the service training academy. I even at one point put in an application for the U.S. Army.
Okay.
Thought that would be a, kind of a good foothold to, do some military experience and then go to police officer service training. So that was kind of the path. That was my intention, to become a police officer and then, do a law enforcement that way. So this was approximately kind of 2014 ish.
Okay.
And I don't know if you remember, but right around that time there was a couple police officer shootings where a couple officers were killed here in Utah.
Okay. I don't remember that.
Specifically, there was one like right in Utah County. It was a Utah highway patrolman, I believe, that got killed, and it kind of just made me like reevaluate my whole life. I was just like, do I really want to do this? I know that police officers aren't paid the best, and they're putting their life on the line every day that they go to work.
Yeah.
So I was just like, what do I do with my degree? Because I was right around the corner from graduating. I didn't want to change, my major.
Yeah.
I didn't want to change what I was doing, because I really did like the law enforcement aspect of it. So I was talking to my school counselor, and she's like, well, maybe you want to do the other side of law enforcement, after the criminals are arrested, and you can go to law school.
Yeah.
And so I just was like, dang, that makes sense. Like, I would love to do that. And so then I kind of just changed gears a little bit. I didn't have to change too much, because I could still graduate with the criminal justice degree.
Yeah.
And then apply to law school. And so I started working with my counselor, and started meeting with the pre-law advisor. And so she was working with me on getting stuff ready to go and preparing for the LSAT, and, starting to study for that. And that's when I kind of just accepted the fact that I wanted to be a lawyer. Or not accepted, I shouldn't say that, but I chose to become a lawyer.
Yeah.
Versus following the path of becoming a police officer.
So the school counselor kind of helped you figure that out.
Yeah, because I was just like, I had friends that were in school and they changed their major like 2 or 3 times, and they're kind of like the super senior.
Yeah.
Like they're in their mid-20s and they're like restarting school over because they switched from like, whatever, art history to accounting, or going to get their MBA.
Something where you can get a job.
Something, that's a little bit more, make some more money. But I didn't want to do that. I was just like, I don't want to go back and restart over.
Yeah.
And I was probably 24, 25 years old.
So did you want to be a prosecutor then? Was that the idea behind going to law school?
Yeah. So
where'd you apply to law school?
So yeah, it was kind of during the whole time of studying for the LSAT. You know how it goes. Like you take the LSAT, and you do really good on it, and that kind of opens the door to different schools. But I was going to I was going to law school fairs on a regular basis.
Okay.
They'd have law school fairs at BYU, UVU. So I was going to all of them, and I was talking to all the reps for all the schools and just getting all these, vouchers to apply to their school. So I ended up applying to 15 schools.
Nice. Okay.
And, I could name them all, but we'd be here for a minute. But some of the big ones, obviously I applied to BYU, University of Utah.
So where'd you end up going?
I ended up going to Creighton.
Okay.
Out in Omaha, Nebraska.
Back to some Midwest, even further east than you'd been before, huh?
Well, I mean, I've been to a lot of states on the East Coast, but yeah, heading back to the Midwest where I grew up. Omaha was only 5 hours away from my hometown.
Oh, okay.
And so we, go out to Omaha because that was like the major airports. If you're ever flying anywhere, you'd have to travel down to Omaha.
Clear back from like your teenage years in South Dakota.
Yeah. So
I see.
I mean, my dad was a podiatrist out there. My mom, taught some special ed classes in the middle school there. So it was very much like me going home.
Cool.
And so it was not a new thing or new territory for me to be out in Omaha.
Yeah, that works out then. So you go to law school at Creighton and you want to be a prosecutor.
Yep.
But as you sit here today, you're not a criminal prosecutor. So what happened?
Funny story. You get into law school and you learn a lot of things in the first year.
Yeah.
And, they always say that, the 3 years of law school, the first year they scare you to death. The second year they work you to death. And then the third year they bore you to death. And so the first year I actually got a position working as a, kind of like a law clerk at the district attorney's office out in Papillion, Nebraska.
Cool. Okay.
So shortly after starting there, I was doing all sorts of criminal work. Sitting in court with defendants and going to their preliminary hearings, their arraignments, things like that, and kind of just had my eyes open to the whole world of prosecution and the whole criminal law side of things, and did not like it.
Why not? What did you not like about it?
To put it simply, I didn't like the repetition of seeing these same offenders over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And there's a line between, your common, minor offenses versus, these violent crimes that are happening. And a lot of it was the same perpetrators over and over and over again, and nothing was being done about it. So I don't know if that's a fault of our criminal justice system overall, but it definitely was an eye-opening experience to me where you're having to deal day in and day out with these dangerous repeat offenders.
Yeah.
And, I have lots of stories of, these certain gentlemen that were, just dangerous to society.
Yeah.
And nothing was being done about it. And then they'd come in, a couple months later for the same offense or something even more horrific. So I just
be tough. Yeah.
Yeah. I just looked at it and I was just like, if I'm going to do this for a career, I'm going to have to deal with this and dealing with defendants over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And it just didn't seem appealing to me.
I get that. I mean, it wouldn't be appealing to me either. It just seems really heavy, honestly, and super valuable. Like society obviously needs like really good prosecutors.
Yeah, for sure.
But like the toll, personally, I never felt super drawn to that. So you started out, criminal justice, police, then, prosecution of these crimes, and then kind of left that entirely. And here you are today as a personal injury attorney.
Yeah, definitely a lot more lighthearted on the personal injury side of things. I mean, I will say with dealing with criminal law, there's a lot of things that weigh heavy on your heart. And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit, like very, very sad stories, very violent stories, and you have to be in the thick of it. And it's a lot of the times it's these victims that are completely helpless, whether it be, an elderly person or a child or things like that. And a lot of times there's not a good outcome. Yeah. And you have to, deal with that and live with that. And just how the criminal justice system is, like sometimes there's not fair justice, for for victims that really had no chance.
Yeah. Yeah. That would be tough to have to kind of feel like you're sitting idly by on some of that.
Yeah.
And just seeing that happen to good people. That's rough. So you graduate law school in Creighton. Mm-hmm. And where do you take your first job as an attorney?
So once I passed the Utah bar, I got my first job at a firm in Salt Lake, Low Law Group.
Okay. So
I started out working as a kind of a pre-litigation attorney, settling personal injury cases for Low Law Group.
Okay. So were you trying to work in the personal injury field, or was that just a job that was available? How'd that happen?
Yeah. So I had a buddy that I graduated law school with, and he got a job working at this firm, and he was telling me about it. And he said, I really like it. You should look into being a personal injury lawyer.
Yeah. You
can make good money. Like it's, decent hours. It's fun work. So he actually got me an interview at the firm that he was working at.
Okay.
And I got offered a job and started working there. So it kind of just fell in my lap, to be honest.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I didn't really have anything planned. And, cause we moved from Omaha back to Utah. We were trying to get settled, studying for the bar, which is a monster in itself.
Yeah.
That's a full-time job and then some, studying for the bar. So I really didn't have any like goals or intentions of like, well, what am I going to do? Like I didn't have time to think about that. It was more like just study for the bar, pass the bar, then figure life out.
Sure.
So once I passed the bar, it kind of just fell in my lap.
So why leave there, and where'd you go?
Well, I left that firm because I wanted to get a little bit more experience, in personal injury, and I wanted to get a little bit more experience as far as like litigation was going. Cause I felt like in my first job, I was first year associate, brand new out of law school, just passed the bar. And I kind of felt like I was doing a lot of ghost writing. And what I mean by that is, I'm doing all the work in somebody else's name.
Sure.
So, for the big names in the firm and the firm itself was actually licensed and doing work in tons of different states. So I was representing clients in Iowa and Minnesota and Texas, Oregon, Washington State, because they'd have like remote satellite offices in all these states. Mm. And so there's local counsel in all these states that I was doing all this work for. And I just felt like I didn't have anything in my name, and I wanted to prove myself. This is Jantz's work.
Yeah.
This is what Jantz is doing. These are Jantz's numbers. I wanted to put out work product with my name on it.
Yeah, I get that.
And kind of make a name for myself. So I started looking around and got an opportunity to go work at what was then called Lawrence, Lindell, and Lofgren, which is a personal injury firm in South Jordan.
Okay.
Great attorneys, great office. Love those guys. But they gave me an opportunity to start litigating some cases and gave me kind of more control over my cases and working with clients. And that was kind of the next step, I felt like, in getting a lot of real world experience in the personal injury universe.
So you get some litigation experience at a great firm, highly reputable firm there, get, some good mentorship exposure as well.
Yep.
And then, so what happened? I mean, because here you are now. You're working with us at McMullin Injury Law.
Yeah. So leaving Omaha, coming back to Utah, I've always wanted to end up in St. George. That's kind of always been like my goal. I have family that lives down here. Both my brothers live down here in the area. And so I kind of just wanted to be close to family and back in Utah. So it just made sense that we wanted to end up in St. George. And that's kind of where it happened. I was working at the firm up in South Jordan. I was living in Lehigh, so it was kind of a commute every day and kind of just living the rat race lifestyle and things up in northern Utah were getting pretty expensive for us. And we were just looking at what can we do as a family, my wife and my kids. And, I saw the job posting for McMullin Injury Law, and I was like, that would be so awesome. And I applied and actually talked to you on the phone. And I remember that phone call.
Yeah.
That was a fun phone call.
Why is that?
Basically you're just, saying like, hey, we're looking for somebody that, that wants to thrive, that wants to, basically kick some ass in personal injury down here in Southern Utah.
I'm sure I wouldn't use that language, but yeah.
No, but that's essentially what the message boiled down to, is like, we're looking for somebody that's, ready to hit it hard.
Yeah. And,
who's hungry to,
You're like, this guy kind of sounds like a tool.
No, I wouldn't say that. Okay. No, I remember you saying you need to like the Utah Jazz, you need to like snowboarding, and you like to go boating. And I'm like, I check all those boxes. I'm perfect for this.
Cool. Okay.
But no, during that phone call, you said that, you're looking for a new attorney, somebody that had this kind of the same experience that I had.
Yeah.
And so, I applied, and McMullin Injury Law, they offered me a job down in St. George. So it was kind of a no-brainer for my family, my wife and I.
Okay. So
we kind of just looked at each other, and it just made sense. And we're like, let's pull the trigger, and we moved down here.
Sweet. Okay. So you've been with our firm then for over a year now. Yep. You've worked at 3 personal injury law firms in Utah. Mm-hmm. So I'm curious, what is different about McMullin Injury Law with the good and the bad? How is your day-to-day different here than your experience at 2 other Utah firms?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, first off, I feel the sense of family connection at McMullin Injury Law. Like, I know that my coworkers, the other attorneys, like, they care about me. They care about me being successful as much as I care about the firm being successful. So there's a very good, like, interconnected web of support at McMullin Injury Law. And I didn't get that necessarily with the other firms I worked at. It was a little bit more cold.
Okay.
Like, it was more of like, we're an attorney office first, and everything else kind of comes second. And that's not to knock the other firms. Like, they did their thing. Firms, they were good firms, great firms to work at, great experience. But just from the very outset of talking with you, talking with Anthony, I could just sense, that you guys truly cared, and you truly wanted me to be a part of the team.
Cool. Okay.
And so that is like the first thing that kind of set McMullin Injury Law apart from the others.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I mean, we're still, by statewide standards, relatively small. I mean, we've got like 20 of us working over there. So yeah, I mean, I hope, we all are looking out for each other, but yeah, I appreciate you saying that. So tell me about like your day to day, what's your role at McMullin Injury Law? Yeah.
So I'm one of the litigation attorneys. So I handle everything from filing a lawsuit all the way through resolution, whether that be, case settlement or trial. Since being at McMullin Injury Law, like we haven't had an opportunity to go to trial yet, but we've had lots of success in settling clients' cases. So I focus primarily on litigation, working with clients. Basically, when claims or their case fails in pre-litigation or pre-lawsuit, negotiating with the insurance companies, then I step in and take over the case and start working with the client on prepping the lawsuit, collecting records, and making sure we have everything collected and ready to go for filing.
Okay.
And then I do everything from drafting the lawsuit, serving the defendant, going into fact discovery, prepping written discovery for litigation.
So tell me, 2 things there. What do you mean by when pre-litigation fails? Why does pre-litigation fail and sometimes lawsuits get filed? Tell me about that.
Yeah. There's a multitude of reasons why cases fail in pre-litigation, whether that be the insurance company doesn't want to negotiate fairly or reasonably with our clients when we submit records that would show that our client needs to be compensated. And sometimes, there's difficulties in cases. Sometimes liability isn't 100%. And that's why insurance companies don't want to pay, what's due to our clients. So there's different things that affect why a case would go to litigation versus staying in claims or pre-litigation. But primarily it's the lack of negotiation or reasonable offers from the insurance companies for our clients who have been injured. And that's why we need to litigate in order to make sure that our clients are being fairly treated.
Yeah. So tell me about like an example of, can you think of a time when an insurance company was unwilling to make an offer that we felt like was in the ballpark of fair, that we could get the case done for our client? Because obviously most of our clients, they don't want their case to go into litigation. They don't want to sue anybody. They don't want to take a red cent from anybody. But when, can you think of an example of when the insurance company is just not willing to pay anything in the ballpark of fair, and you get involved and a lawsuit gets filed and things turn out differently?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. I mean, I know litigation is kind of a scary word for some people, and it can be daunting. But looking at litigation, it's a step-by-step process. And that's kind of how I look at it. So from start to finish, there's certain boxes you have to check. There's certain things you have to basically go down a checklist and make sure you're getting it done. So, and that's kind of the way I look at it. But one example is we had a client who was in it was a relatively minor collision. Okay. He was driving his car down, I believe it was, let's see, I'm not good with all the roads around here, but I think it was Riverside Drive. Okay. Right over by Smith's. So the intersection of Riverside Drive and Mall Drive. Yeah. So he's driving eastbound. He's in the inside lane, and he sees this car parked on the side of the road. And if you know that road, like there's not really a shoulder to pull off, and you shouldn't be just parked on the side of the road. Sure. And it was early morning. It was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and all of a sudden this car pulls a U-turn, crossing 2 lanes of traffic, trying to head the opposite direction. He had no time to react. And there was a pretty violent collision. Yikes. Okay. It was violent as in sudden T-bone, and there was nothing that he could do. And there was some pretty good crunch on the vehicles. But, he had, I think about, off the top of my head, I don't know how much the dollar amount he had in medical specials, but it was relatively minor. I think he had about $15,000 in medical bills. So he gets hurt. It takes roughly, let's say, $15,000 for the doctors to get him all the treatment he needs to cure him, to get him back to pre-accident health. Okay. Yep. From there, kind of through the negotiations process with the insurance company for the at-fault driver, they were only offering, I think, like $13,000. And we just weren't getting it done. Yeah. So less than the bills alone, with nothing for the guy. Yeah. Less than bills. We're trying to do right by him, and, liability is clear. Like, this person pulled a U-turn, an improper U-turn in front of our client. So we had to file a lawsuit. And through that, this is actually one of the funnest stories I've had so far, is through the process of litigation, you file a complaint with the district court. In that complaint, you allege certain facts. You allege the wrongdoing of the at-fault driver, and that, there's a prayer for relief at the end of the complaint saying our client plaintiff deserves a judgment against the defendant. And then there's, various things that we ask for, mostly being the past, present, and future medical damages for our client. And so we filed the complaint, and with filing the complaint, the defendant has 21 days to answer the lawsuit. Okay. So in this case that I'm talking about, the defendant doesn't answer the lawsuit. It just sits there. Okay. And sits there and sits there, and nothing's being done. We've contacted the insurance company. Hey, your driver's getting sued. Like, you need to answer this lawsuit. And nothing from the insurance company. So under the rules of Utah, you have you can file for a default judgment, and you can pursue a judgment even without the person answering. So that's what we had to do. We had to,
Oh, wow. Okay.
we had to file, what's called a default judgment. And we, had to wait a certain amount of days for that judgment to be, I guess, granted.
Yeah.
And then you have to wait a certain number of days for it to kind of go through, because they can still appeal it and withdraw it. And then the litigation process would start all over. But through the entire process, it was, I think, the day before the 90 days of appealability that we finally heard from the other party.
No way. Okay.
And so in our default judgment, we actually asked for more money, or in excess of the policy limits on the insurance company.
Okay.
I think the policy limits were like 50,000, and I believe, I don't know the exact dollar amount off the top of my head, but we asked for a default judgment of 80,000, and we got that granted. And
Awesome.
then after the 90-day waiting period, the insurance company called us up, and they're like, all right, we'll pay it.
No way. So you ended up actually getting the client more than the limit of the insurance available on the car that hit him.
Yeah, that's right.
And their offer prior to getting their insured sued was $13,000.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely lower than what the bills were. And I don't want to mix up the numbers, but it was definitely not a fair and reasonable offer.
And the insurance company ended up paying $80,000.
Mm-hmm.
How much of that did not the bad driver, but the driver that made the U-turn and caused the crash, how much of that did they pay out of pocket?
Fortunately for them, nothing.
Sweet.
The insurance company unilaterally agreed to pay the policy limit and then the excess amount, or I guess essentially the full judgment that was against their insured, the at-fault driver.
Awesome, which as well they should. I mean, they ghosted you for 90 days and missed all their deadlines. I mean, that's unusual, right?
Yeah, they missed all the deadlines, and that's kind of unheard of.
Yeah.
Essentially when a defendant or an at-fault driver gets served with a lawsuit, they turn that over to their insurance company, and the insurance company hires their own attorneys to represent, their side of things.
When you call people and say, hey, the offer's terrible, like there's just no way to get it done and get your bills paid, like really the only way to make the fair thing happen here is we're going to have to file a lawsuit. Do you get a lot of kickback from clients, like saying, I don't want to do that? Or what are their thoughts typically there?
Yeah. And I kind of feel like it's kind of a mixed bag as far as reactions on different cases. Some clients are all for it, and they're gung ho, they're ready, they're willing to help with whatever we need. And then some clients are more hesitant. They like I said, they hear the word litigation and they get very withdrawn because it's a process that they're not familiar with. It's a daunting process to some. So there's kind of a mixed bag as far as reactions. But one of the things I usually do is I try to explain things in a very simple process, or in a simple way of the process of litigation. Like, hey, look, like if we're going to get an increased offer from the insurance company, or if we, simply put, if we want to get more money in your pocket, then we need to file. Like there's no other way, if, ands, or buts about it, because we got a final offer from the insurance company. They basically say, this is our full and final offer. There's not going to be a penny more. So that kind of just forces our hand in filing litigation and filing a lawsuit. And sometimes that is the case. And sometimes you file a lawsuit and you can turn right around and, ask the insurance company, hey, let's settle this, even after filing the lawsuit. And that kind of also ups the ante as far as the insurance company is concerned in settling the lawsuit.
So why is it that most cases, even when you have to actually commence litigation by filing a lawsuit, that most of those don't end up in trial?
Well, yeah, and that's a good question. There's at any point during litigation, even day after filing, and I've had cases do this, even after the day after filing, the case can settle. So, I mean, there's no like hard line or some sort of time frame where a case has to settle, within this certain time frame, or there's no settlement, you have to go to trial.
Why would a case settle a day after filing a lawsuit?
Because the insurance company catches wind that they're insured, their driver just got sued. So that can be a motivating factor for some insurance companies to try to settle their case without having to pay the costs of litigation. Because one of the things of litigation is it costs money for both sides. Yeah. And whatever it is, the insurance company has to pay their attorneys, and they work on an hourly basis. They don't work on a contingency. So, 5 hours of work for a defense counsel costs the insurance company X amount of dollars. And so that they look at it as like, oh, we're going to be paying tons of money in litigation. Let's just pay the claim, right after filing the lawsuit.
So for the insurance company, I mean, if their job is to save money for their company, they want to resolve the claim for as little as they can. Mm-hmm. They try to do that. Mm-hmm. And essentially, if you call their bluff, don't settle it for the pennies on the dollar, file the lawsuit, suddenly they're taking it a lot more seriously. And now they're also realizing they're staring down the barrel of other costs. And so it becomes a win-win potentially for them to pay more.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah.
Gotcha.
That's right.
Okay.
I mean, there are some cases where it's going to be a fight. And we know that going into it. And we know that potentially it could settle farther down the road, farther down the litigation process. But some cases are, fight tooth and nail every inch of the way. Because you gotta claw your way to establish liability. You gotta claw your way to establish, that the accident caused the injuries. And so there's a lot of work that goes into it on some cases. And that's why I said that it's a mixed bag as far as, what's going to come down the pipeline versus what you shoot out into litigation.
Do you like being a personal injury attorney?
I love it.
Why is that?
Man, there's a couple answers, I guess. One, I always kind of grew up hating insurance companies. My dad was a doctor. And in his practice dealing with insurance company, although it's different than personal injury, just even dealing with the insurance companies from a medical perspective. And I've heard this from my dad, and I've heard this from, dentists that my wife has worked for. It's just very difficult to get money from insurance companies to pay for anything. So long story short, I've always kind of heard from people that insurance companies are just awful to work with. So I want to stick it to them.
Okay. So you like being the guy that gets to make them pay what's fair.
Yeah, essentially.
Yeah. That's cool. I love that part about it too. Is there anything about being a personal injury attorney that you don't like?
No, honestly, you have your good days, you have your bad days. And I think that's true with everything, and you also have good clients, you have difficult clients.
Sure.
So, there are days where you kind of just get a little run down because with the work that we do, it's very busy. It's very interactive with clients. It's essentially a customer service based, line of work. We solve problems for our clients, because these clients are facing an uphill battle with whether it be with treatment, with getting their medical bills paid, getting their property damage fixed, finding doctors, and how do I get better, and then dealing with the insurance company over all of that. Like, it's a complete uphill battle. And, so there's a lot of things that we have to do for our clients to help them. And sometimes it's very urgent, and sometimes it's, you don't hear from the client for months, and you're like, what happened? Did they fall off the face of the earth?
Yeah.
So it's very much like you got to field and ground, kind of what's coming your way. So there are days where you get a little overwhelmed. But I've always you got to take a deep breath. Just let's do one thing at a time. Let's get it done. And then you can move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What's the biggest case that you ever worked on as far as a settlement that you were a part of working on that file? Do you remember?
Oh man, I mean, let's see. Now I'm drawing a blank.
That's okay.
I mean,
that's probably a good sign that the smaller cases are just as important to you and you remember them just as much.
It really is. Like I've always kind of felt like the little victories kind of make it like that much more enjoyable, or 100%. The little victories are like the ones that stick with you, versus like the big settlements. And, they're always awesome to get, clients are always so happy, tears and hugs and thank yous. And, but sometimes it's like the little cases, the little victories where you're like, if we do this one little thing, we can push it to a settlement. And then, even though it's not a ton of money, like it makes all the difference to the client.
Yeah.
And they're just so happy with you. And that's what kind of makes it super fun, because it's a game.
Yeah.
Like it's all a game to try to see how you can outmaneuver the other side, outmaneuver, what they're thinking and try to overcome it. And it's kind of a chess game essentially.
Yeah.
But
I'm with you there. Like, you get some client that's like, poor little old lady who gets hurt in a crash, but not that bad. Right. And she's got, a few $1,000 in medical bills, and the insurance is ghosting her, offering her zero. Mm-hmm. And you suddenly settle the case for $9,000 and you get all her bills paid, and she gets a few $1,000 in her pocket on top of getting her bills paid, when she thought she was having to come out. Like those, for that particular client, like it's night and day. Like it feels the same, honestly, as like $1 million case. That's one thing that's fun about what we do. So tell me about a little more about Jantz on the personal side. I know you're married and have kids. How'd you meet your wife?
So I was, yeah. She'll probably hate me for telling this, but I met my wife, sorry, while we were working at Applebee's.
Okay. Sweet.
So I was, going to school at UVU. I was bartending at Applebee's.
Okay.
Working full time, going to school full time. Long story short, and I had a prior relationship that ended. My wife was working at Applebee's, and I remember the first time I saw my wife.
Sweet. Let's hear that.
The first time I saw my wife, I had like this like distinct thought of like, this girl is going to play a huge role in my life. And I didn't even that was the first time I ever saw her. Didn't even know her name yet.
Wow.
And I saw her, and I remembered exactly what she was wearing and how her hair was done. She always has like this like kind of top knot and kind of messy bun on top. She had that on with like a little headband, and she was in her Applebee's gear, and she had these little bright neon dangly earrings.
That's awesome.
I remember that distinctly, but I remember thinking like, this girl's going to have a huge impact in my life. And then, yeah, I had that prior relationship ended, and I don't want to talk about that, but I remember asking Ashley out, and she said no.
Oh no.
Yeah. And I was just like, all right, well, can we at least, hang out in our friends group? Cause all of our friends worked at Applebee's. It was a very kind of tight knit group.
Okay.
And she kept telling me no. She's like, I just, for whatever reason, she just kept telling me no. And eventually she said yes. And it was, October 11th, 2015. Was our first date.
No way. So Jan's the hopeless romantic. I had no idea.
Kinda, yeah.
First sight.
Well, I mean, if you've ever seen Ashley, then you would be too.
I get it.
Yeah.
So you were used to getting told no's and pushing your way to yes, even before you got into personal injury work.
That's right. That's right.
So cool.
But yeah, a year almost to the day we got married.
Awesome.
So I should clarify. It was October 11th, 2014. We got married October 10th, 2015.
Very cool. And you have, so that's what, 8 years ago?
Yeah.
And you have how many kids?
We got 3 little girls.
3 little girls. Tell me about them.
So I have a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old and a 7-month-old.
What's that like?
It's just pink and princess and sparkles and ponies, unicorns and rollerblades, and all day, every day.
It's not like growing up on a farm with brothers.
No, definitely not. Definitely not farming or hunting. You know, shotguns and riding in the back of trucks. It's very much we're doing the whole princess thing right now.
Yeah,
and that's kind of all we do, and I love it. About being a girl dad from the very beginning to now having 3 girls. It's kind of just my bread and butter,
Yeah. So cool. Well, you've got a beautiful family for sure. Appreciate you taking time today. Is there anything else that the world should know about Jantz Johnson?
Let's see. I do love the Utah Jazz. I love wakeboarding. I love snowboarding. Just being outdoors. If I'm not at work or if I'm not spending time at the house with family and my girls, then I'm outside doing something.
Cool. Okay. Awesome. Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks.
Thanks.